Hi, this is Walt Chan, and I'm the VP of Engineering here at Rancher Labs. In this video, I want to be able to show you some of the new features in our Rancher 2.0 tech preview that was just released. The engineering team has been hard at work for the last 4 to 5 months, so I'm pretty excited to be able to highlight some of the major components they've been working on. Now, before I get started with the demo, I do want to let you know that this is a very early version of Rancher 2.0. Along with the initial preview release, our release goal is to ship many and frequent updates as needed until we declare a GA build. In the meantime, Rancher 1.6 is our most current stable release, and I recommend if you are planning to run production workload to use that version. Okay, let's get started. To install the Rancher server, make sure you have a Linux host, and I recommend Ubuntu 16.04, at least 4 MB of memory, and at least Docker 1.12.6 or newer. Just like 1.0, Rancher is installed as a Docker container and just requires a single Docker run command. Here, let me show you again. And just be aware that it could take several minutes to download the Docker image and to configure the server, but you'll know it's done when you can successfully access the Rancher UI on your browser via your host IP port 8080. So, as you can see here, my Rancher server is up and running, and this is what you initially see. So what's new? Well, the obvious thing we did with 2.0 is to completely refresh the UI. Rancher 1.0 has been around since March of 2016, and with over 16 million downloads to date, we've gotten a lot of feedback from you guys, and I'll show you some of the new UI elements in a bit. The other big change is the fact Rancher is now completely rebased on top of Kubernetes. We've always been a big fan of Kubernetes, and while we did do some initial integration with 1.0 in the form of installing, operating, and managing Kubernetes as an environment, we simply were not satisfied with how it meshed with the rest of the Rancher UX once it was up and running. With 2.0, this all changes. Not only do you get access to the same native Kubernetes experience, but you'll also get the rest of the Rancher UX on top of it. That includes the CLI, the UI, the API, and Docker Compose. Alright, so immediately you can see you have two options. Like 1.0, Rancher will have created a default cluster and environment for you. You really just have to add at least one host so we can use that to launch containers on. So on the left side here, you'll select this option to add hosts to your existing cluster. So as you can see here, I have some of the popular cloud providers like EC2, Azure, DigitalOcean, and of course you can always select this option to select other ones that may be missing. Of course, just like 1.0, you always have the option to simply grab this Docker run command and run on every single host, and they will automatically be added into this cluster. Okay, so now let's go see our second option. So on this right side, this option, which is completely new in 2.0, is our import Kubernetes cluster. You can use popular hosted solutions like GKE or Azure Container Service, or you can bring your own installations using popular things like kops or kubeadm, or you can even in fact use a distro that just comes directly from Ubuntu. It's really your choice. Once you select this is really easy. All you have to do is just take this kubectl apply command and apply it to your Kubernetes cluster. And once you import your Kubernetes cluster to Rancher, you will immediately gain some the access to some of these features. For one, you get a single control plane to manage all your K8 clusters. That includes things like having a single authentication point to full Rollback capabilities. You get access to a rich app catalog that supports both Docker and Kubernetes YAML format. And of course, you'll be able to use our market-leading UX on top of all your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, I've got at least one host in my cluster now. If this is the very first host you added, it could take several minutes before Rancher has all the infrastructure services and Kubernetes components up and running. If you want to quickly check, just hop on over to the system environment and just make sure all these services are green before you start launching containers. So let's swap back to the default environment. Let's go back to host. Again, I could add additional hosts by clicking this button here. And this is one of the new feature in 2.0. We call this the host template. So essentially every time you add a host from the UI, Rancher will automatically save that so that you can reuse that the next time you want to add more. So for this example, I already previously added a DigitalOcean host. I really just have to go in this screen and type in more hosts as my name, for example, and add the count and go. And notice this time I don't have to re-add my keys or anything like that. You immediately notice that the host page is now a simple list table format. For the 1.0 users out there, if I click on this icon here, you'll immediately see the old view that we had before. But again, generally here you have your usual actions to the right, and if I click onto the host detail page, you'll see some additional simple stats about the host itself and the rest of the information about the host. So let's go to the container management screen. Before I show you guys how to create a container, let's check out the Advanced tab. Just to show you, what we have here is 3 options for you to show you that this is indeed a Kubernetes cluster. The first one is I can always download kubeconfig and apply it to my local kubecontrol CLI so I can talk to this cluster. I can also launch a shell. For example, if I quickly check, this should only list one host, which I have added previously from DigitalOcean. And of course, I can always launch the dashboard. Again, I can show you that I've got a single node and I've got nothing here. No pods right now in my default namespace. Let's hop onto the container management page and let's create a container. So what we've done in 2.0 is to allow you to manage your containers using the K8 native tools, as I just previously showed. Or I can use the Rancher UX to quickly launch containers as well. The Rancher UX is essentially an add-on / controller that talks to the K API manager to ultimately create pods. So let's create one. I'll click on Add Container, and let's call this Test. And I'll pick the defaults as the Ubuntu image. But here you'll see you have the usual suspect of port mappings and adding environment variables to the rest of the Docker run options here. Let's click Launch. And what's going to happen is a Rancher will ultimately result in creating a pod onto that Kubernetes cluster. It's pretty fast here because I already had an Ubuntu image before. But let's hop onto the Kubernetes dashboard and refresh this UI. And you should see that Rancher ultimately created a test pod. So let me show you a couple of new features in the 2.0 UI. The first one is exec shell. Believe it or not, this is one of the most sought after feature from a 1.0 UI, but in 2.0 I will have the ability to resize the shell. So let's bring it back. The other thing I want to show you is our improved upgrade rollback feature. To do this, let's quickly add another container. Let's call it upgrade, and let's launch this guy. While it's doing that, I'll show you a couple other features. For one, we have multi-select now. You can select multiple containers and start and stop them if you want to. We have filters now because of the table format, and we improved our search as well. So if I wanted to find the upgrade container, you'll see that it's a lot more responsive in the new UI. So let's take this container and let's upgrade it. So for this, I'm just going to add a new environment variable called foo=bar and click upgrade. And so what's happening in the background is Rancher is stopping the old container and recreating a new one with the new environment variable. Okay, so here's the rollback feature. I can click on rollback and I can choose a revision to roll back to. And Rancher 2.0 does support more than just the previous one. But here you'll see that if I want to roll back to my previous version, it'll tell you the delta now between the previous version. So next thing I'm going to show you is our new apps management page. And really an app is an instance of a catalog item. So I can hop onto the catalog, and this should be similar to 1.0 except the fact that we added additional search feature. I'll quickly find Ghost. You see that this is the Ghost catalog item, and I'll click Launch. And this should take you know, a little bit to get up and running, but it looks like it's done. So if I go back to the container, you'll see that just like the 1.0 UI will give you a easy link or to access the app that you just launched. So here we go. That's the Ghost platform UI. Let's show you the final feature for this video. And that is our new cluster and environment management. So I'm going to go to the right and click Manage Cluster. And so we have our default one that the default cluster that I created in the beginning of this video. But really what a cluster now in 2.0 is a group of your physical or virtual compute resources. And environment is really a namespace where you launch your containers on. What that means is because we are leveraging Kubernetes now, multiple environments or namespaces can now share the same physical resources. So I'll quickly just add a test cluster here, cluster 1, and click Create. And you'll see that with this cluster, I have the same option of adding hosts to that cluster, which equals to a new Kubernetes cluster, or I can import an existing Kubernetes environment or cluster. Also, I can go in here and create a new environment. Let's call it environment will. Let's put it into the default cluster that I had previously. And you'll see that I can swap to the new environment will. And again, I can quickly create a container here. Let's call it Ubuntu will. Click Run. And you'll see that between the default environment, it has its containers that I just created, and also environment will, which has the container I just created. If I quickly just hop back to the Kubernetes dashboard, you'll see what I mean. Given that I'm in the default namespace, I should have 3 containers here from what I just created previously. If I swap over to the new namespace I just created, you'll see that I have the one I just created. Okay, so I've given a quick overview at some of the new features in 2.0 with many more planned in the upcoming months. This includes features like improved volume management, Rollback, and a few others. I do highly suggest you try this out yourself, and please do provide any feedback, comments, suggestions in either our forums or user Slack. And thank you so much for watching this video.